There you go. Cheers.
Thanks, Tracy. So my name is Mike Taylor, Senior SAP Consultant with Forgestic. Today, we're going to be covering supplier payments and check management, as you can see there. Next slide. We will be covering the following topics: payment terms. We'll talk about the setup for vendors. We'll do a manual payment and a payment wizard payment. And then we'll talk specifically about check management. And I'll throw a little bit of EFT file creation stuff in there. And then we'll have time for some questions at the end.
That sounds good.
So let me jump to my system. So here we have SAP. I'm going to start with my demo vendor called Demo Vendor. So first we'll talk about payment terms. So payment terms, you set these up, you link them to a specific business partner, whether it's a vendor or a customer, and I'll drill into here. I just wanted to show a scenario with discounting. It will show up later when we do our payments, the cash discount. So this can be set to kind of anything you want. Usually I will leave the accounts receivable ones. I won't put the AR in front of the accounts receivable ones, so it's a little bit cleaner for on the customer side. So, you know, obviously you have like net 30, but on the AP side, I like to just note accounts payable. And the reason I break it apart like this to have payment terms is so that you can have the price list linked to the right place. So in this case, I want vendors to be linked to the vendor price list, and I want the customer side ones to be linked to the sales price. So what we want to avoid, it's not really the end of the world on the purchasing side, AP side. What you want to avoid is if you set a new vendor to an AR term, it will, you don't want it to auto lock it to the sales price list. That's why I like to have this distinction. It leads to more payment terms codes, but I think in the end, it actually makes it a little bit easier. So that's why I have an AP 2% 10 at 30. You would set the due date based on whatever you're going to do here, document date. I think on the AP side, it's better to have the document date so you can post it on the date you're posting it. And then if you age it based on your document date, you can still put the vendor's document date and do the aging from that. If you always age based on your posting date, I don't think there's kind of a legal requirement in this. Some people post it on the same date as the document date. Some people like to post when they post and backdate the document. I won't talk as much about that, but you could choose which one you're going to do today. I'm going to do document date plus 30 days. I'm going to have only one installment. If you do break these into multiple installments, you can have these set up. I'm not going to cover that as much today, but you can do multiple installments, break it up into 50-50, or percentages are based on time and set due dates. And more specifically, what I want to talk about here for terms is your cash discount. So we've set 2%, 10 days. So we can reuse this on other terms, but this effectively just says if you pay within that 10-day window, it will automatically show you a discount of 2% on your document. And you can switch this manually when you're paying. I will show you when we actually do a payment, but just to show you where this kind of all comes together. So 2%, 10, net 30 days, but you also have a cash discount name. And I'm just using this as a slightly more complicated example. Obviously, you can have nothing here for the cash discount, and it will function as normal with no cash discount. So you have your payment terms, payment run. Under the payment run, this is where we set up the second part of the kind of supplier payment management discussion here, which is the payment methods. These are not technically required at all if you're not using the payment wizard, but this is the first step into using the payment wizard. And without these, the payment wizard will not function. You need to tag your vendors with the payment methods you will accept from them. And then you would also, as a best practice, want to set a default for them. So as you can see here in this box, I have a few different ones. So I have check, CAD, EFT, EFT, CAD, a couple different things. And then I have US check. So this vendor, would accept Canadian check. That's their default, but also potentially you will do an EFT for them as well. So I just did general EFT. So I've checked the boxes for include, and then I've highlighted one and I've clicked set as default, and I've clicked update. So just to remind you that with most things in SAP, if you make a change, it does not go back and try to set any of your existing documents. It assumes that when you move forward, you will want to use these now as the new default. It doesn't automatically assume that it should change any of the historical information. So as mentioned, most things in SAP function that way. Sometimes there's a prompt, but a lot of the times there isn't. So that is how you want to think about it. So the next step then would be, say you're setting this up and you want to set all of this particular vendor to their particular new payment method. You either have to go into all of their invoices. I just click account balance here to see the general ledger view. And then you can go into one of these ones. And then you can go to accounting and switch the payment method. Or if you happen to have B1 up and you're looking for another reason to use it, you can use their document manager. So I'm going to click here this change payment method button just to bring up a shortcut. But you can look into the document master data manager. I just set it up as a demo example here so I can find all the documents related to this particular vendor by code. And then I can actually just go and switch the payment method on these all at once. So it's really nice to use the B1UP document master data manager functions. I won't dwell on this too much, but just so you're aware, you can use this to change all of the open documents to a new payment method if you want to make that change all at once. You could also potentially just you could use the master data manager to say what is the current default for all the vendors and then reset all the open documents. You can also use the data transfer workbench if you want to do a mass update on those, if you're wanting to get started using the payment method, payment wizard method. Okay, so we've covered payment terms and we've covered payment methods. There's not too much in the payment method to really discuss here. We see it's Canadian check spelled Canadianly, and you will see that it's a payment term check from your particular bank account that you want to draw. This could be just broken up by different banks as well if you want to automatically have it be assigned to a different bank. And the only other thing I really like to select is the currency selection, just to make sure that I'm only doing Canadian checks in this particular payment method. So you break it up and maybe you have a USD checking and a Canadian checking, and you would just want to divide those and make sure that you do your Canadian check run with the Canadian dollar CAD check vendors, and then you do your USD run, and maybe you manage that a little bit differently with the USD check there, which this one isn't currently. So I'm going to do a manual payment to show you what that looks like. And then I'll do a payment wizard run as well to show you how that would look. So I'm just going to refresh this just to go back. We'll go modules, banking, outgoing payments, outgoing payments. Pick your vendor that you want to pay. Again, this is just the straightforward single pay. Maybe somebody you're going to pay them specifically. You just want to make one check and you want to run through that. You don't want to do a check run. If you do it with this method, you will queue it up you will queue any check that you make into the check queue to be printed, but you'll still have to do this in 2 steps. So you have to queue up all of your checks and then print all of your checks. So you could do a couple of manual outgoing payments. Then a little bit later in this demo, I will show you how to print the checks. But until you actually print the check, it is not an official check. So the reason for this is you could queue up 100 checks, but maybe you only want to print 3 or 4 immediately. You could actually go into check printing, just check those 1, 2, 3, and it, because the majority of people are using pre-numbered check stock, you would need to enter the right check. So in order to get things in the right order, you queue up the check from the various methods. Usually people are either using all outgoing payments manually, maybe they run from the AR or AP aging, or you're somebody who's got into the payment wizard, and the payment wizard, you would do all of your payments all at once. And it is, once it's set up, it is a much more, it's a much more efficient way to do it, I would say. So this, again, certain people do different ways. Maybe they don't know. I will just do one here. So if I'm going to pay one, just going to check one. I could check them all. I could sort them by due date. You could see overdue days, however you manage your AP. You can also see that I made an invoice here, 900477, and it has a cash discount because we're within the 10 days. So it's going to suggest an amount less of your cash discount. You can also use your form settings to clean this up. So certain ones you don't need. Maybe I did that too quickly. The form settings here, every individual user has their own form settings. I encourage you to get into there. If some column doesn't make sense to you, you don't ever use it, and you have no clue what it is, just remove it. There's a lot of visual noise in SAP Business One by default. Cleaning it out helps people to focus on what they need to focus on, because sometimes you're just overwhelmed by too many fields. So you want to clean that up. So the form settings icon at the top, like blocked, you're probably not going to use. If you don't use distribution rules, then you don't need those. You don't use blanket agreements. You don't use those. You don't use payment order runs. You don't need that. You could put the total discount. What else can we add here? These are pretty good. And I'll leave those there. Oh, you could put due date in there too if you want to see that. So this is a little bit cleaner. Oh, total rounding. Most people aren't doing rounding. Get rid of that. So you can see now the cash discount of $2 is $20. So you can change these. Maybe you're not going to take the early pay discount for whatever reason. Maybe you have a different number there that you want to change. Maybe you don't want to pay this full document. Let's uncheck this, and you want to just pay $15 of this in this case. You can change that, and whatever you change it to, it's going to keep a record of that, so you can pay a portion of it, and then it will say what the balance due is, and it'll say total remaining payment, so it'll always know where you stand with that. So there's a lot of customization. You can do this all in the payment wizard as well, so I won't cover that in there. The payment wizard basically just does this window with all of your vendors all at once that you've selected. So I'm going to take this. This is, again, a manual payment. Some people may be doing this, more comfortable with this way. We'll go to payment means, affectionately call this the money bags. You can also go down here in the bottom, money bags, just payment means, right click, payment means, money bags are everywhere. So you can click one of those, whichever one you like. Queuing up for a check in the amount. You can see I just did a $15 payment. Maybe I'll just set that back to the full amount. So I see the total that I have to pay, $30.99 here. I'm going to do a check. You can right click and say copy balance due. If you like to use a shortcut, you can use Control B, bravo, and that will pull it in there. You can see that the check number is 0. So that might be kind of a cause for alarm initially. But if you remember what I said, we're queuing this up. It has not been set up to actually print. So we are saying that this check is now in the queue for when we do print it. So we can't give it a check now because physically you haven't actually put those checks in the printer. So that's why it will show 0. And I'll show you that again later, and I'll show you how it changes once you actually do print it. So you do that, okay, and add, and that's pretty much it. You can add, you know, notes in different places, references, but this is basically going to do a single payment. So that's going to record that I did a $30.99 payment to a check. The check being zero, we know that it is going to checks for payment. We know that the zero, because we're sophisticated SAP Business One users, we know if it says zero, it's not printed yet. So again, no cause for alarm in that regard. And that queues it up. So I won't print the checks now. I'm going to jump into the payment wizard. So remember the payment wizard, you need the payment methods to do the payment wizard. Banking, payment wizard. Sounds pretty cool, actually, payment wizard. So you can start a new payment run. There's certain cases where you can load an existing payment run if you want to double check what you did the payments. A lot of the times this is used for, you could see what check run it was paid in, or, you know, in a lot of cases, people are doing EFT files. So maybe if there was an error in the EFT file or you forgot some bank information, you would have to go back and review that. In this case, we are just going to start a totally new payment run. I don't mess with the name. Typically, it gives it like kind of this based on the date and stuff. You can change the dates. In this case, we're going to indicate we're going to now going check. If we're going to do a bank transfer run for EFTs, we're not covering that so much today, but for EFT files, this is where you would do that if you want to generate EFT files. If you're planning to ever generate EFT files or you want to get into generating EFT ACH files, you would want to start by getting familiar with the payment wizard, because that's where everything is done. Oh, I did forget something. I wanted to go to modules, outgoing payments again. I'm sorry, I'm jumping back here. But if you want to, let me go to demo vendor. Just a quick note here. If you want to show the vendor's reference number for payment, you need to do this once per vendor. So this is another thing where your form settings are. So you can see this is just SAP's document numbers, but maybe you want to look at what the actual invoices that you entered into for that particular AP invoice. So my AP invoice, I put here. You never want to put the vendor's number manually up in the corner. It's not a good practice. A whole bunch of reasons for that. I don't have time to go into it today. You want to put the vendor's invoice number up here. Sorry, I digress there. But in order to show that, you want to make sure you push form settings, document, BP reference number, and you need to do that once per vendor, and then you'll have their number. And if you don't even want to see your own SAP numbers, you want to be able to keep those sequentially, but they're not necessarily as important to see because you want to know that you're paying them. And of course, anything referred to with the vendor will use their number, not your number, just for the sake of ease, okay? Forgot about that. So BP, that's a very important part there. So I will go payment run date, that's automatic. I'm just going to say it's today. I'm going to do a run for checks. I'm not going to mess with any of these other options. Again, a lot of visual noise, just kind of filter those out. You want to choose based on a group or a range how you're going to pull that data. So I'm going to add to the list. Just everybody who has the option of doing that, you can select or remove them or just select a particular property. If you want to customize that list, or maybe you're only doing high priority vendors, you can set them as a property of high priority vendors and filter for them. Due date, you're going to need to put something in here. So this will show you only documents that are actually due up to that date. So you could say, you could put this out, like maybe you're going to pay up to the 30th of the month today. There aren't 30 days in this month. My bad. It's already February. Wait, yeah, it's already February, almost mid-February. So you put there what you want to do. And so again, a little date trick. If you put 28, it's going to assume the same month. If you go 0115, it's going to assume the same year. And if you want to do a different year, you would need to go 12/31/2021 in order to get the year. So if you want to do just today, you can just put any letter in there, tab, and it'll use today. So I'll just use for, I'll put this out a little bit. So I'll put next. You could do all these things. I don't usually, but I'm not that sophisticated in that regard. So you have to choose. Now, this is why you have to have your payment methods linked to those particular documents. You would need to choose one that was linked to it. So you see check, CAD. This is the only one that actually has any transactions linked to it. If it's not showing up, you need to review all those specific documents. Again, if I go to the account balance and I look at a particular transaction, not the transaction, the origin, you want to look at the accounting tab and you want to make sure that this is linked to Canadian check. If it's blank, that's why it's not going to show up there. Okay, so back to here, I'm going to push next. And you can see we have two nice vendors here that are have all the documents up to the selection criteria you have selected. I'm going to expand, and you can see that this is effectively the same as the outgoing payments. It is just going to show you all of their stuff, so you can work through this in the same manner as you did with the outgoing payment, just through all of your vendors all at once. So you can go through here, check off specific documents. You can see that we have this discounted one here that is going to give you the same business logic as it did in the individual payments. And you can see that it lists out what the number of checks are. There's a number of reasons that you would maybe want to divide the checks. In this case, I have it set up just one check per BP, and it'll give you the amount that you're going to pay on that check. So you might say that there's a lot less documents in here than there were in the outgoing payment. So you can look through, and this is a really good thing here, the non-included transactions. So this button down here in the bottom left, non-included transactions, this is going to show you all the things that potentially would be fitting into this. But you could see there's no payment method, no payment method, no payment method. And you can see all these different things as to why they wouldn't be linked. So if you drill into those particular documents, fix those, you can refresh and see those documents there and then pay those as well. So that's a really good solution for somebody who's just getting used to the system, and you see non-included transactions and you know that there was an invoice. As you're starting to trust the system, you can use that to figure it out. Same with the other documents. You can use the form settings to clean out some of these things. Maybe you don't care about some of these. Maybe you need different things in there. You can add them, move them, shift around the columns, left click and hold. So you can just move those, drop them up there, drop them down here. And then you can set those wherever you want in order to have it look like you want it. So once you've checked that, you are going to go to next. You can save the recommendations, come back later to view an existing unexecuted payment run, payment wizard run as I'd shown. You can execute this as a payment order run. There's a little bit more to that I'm not going to cover today, but payment order run basically is kind of a request to approve your payments before you truly execute it. Or you can execute the whole thing right now, which I'm going to do just for simplicity. So this is going to run through. It's going to actually make the specific documents, and it is going to queue up the checks. So this is as if you had done an outgoing payment. So if I look in the outgoing payment, I look here, I have the things I've selected for the vendors I've selected. Also, I have more checks queued in there. You can print through here. If you were going to do a bank file for an EFT, you would generate it here. You can print any of these documents and summaries, and there's a lot of different options here to print them in bulk. I am now done with this though, because I've done what I need to do. I've queued up all of my checks. If I go and I look in banking, outgoing payments and checks for payment, we can see that we have a bunch of checks that are 0. And again, because you're a sophisticated SAP user, you know that that's because we haven't printed them. So we're going to go to modules, banking, document printing. We're going to pick our stuff. Usually if you don't get any information, you have too small of a window of time. So I think this is more than enough. This should show our checks. Oh, because I'm on the wrong number. And then we have the checks, the 3 checks we've done here. This is where we're going to see the next check number. If you're locked in here, where you need to go is modules, administration, setup, banking, and house bank accounts. Sometimes you're going to see that this is locked for printing. If 2 users try to print at the same time, it's going to lock the bank account. So we look at the bank, and then this lock checks for printing will be checked. You just need to come in here, uncheck it, make sure the other user is out. In this case, we have all our checks for printing, and we have the check number. The next check number was already set up. So we know that we're going to be prompted for pre-numbered check stock 10,000. We can see it here. If we, something happened or we scrapped some or we're starting a new series, we can change it here as well. But what we're going to do is print these. This is going to print to a specific printer. In this case, I'm just going to print to PDF. So this is going to go 10,000. Just print some of these. This is going to prompt me for each one. This would normally just be spitting out of a printer where you'd had your bypass pre-numbered check stock. So it's going to do them incrementally. And then what you'll have after it's done printing is this check number confirmation window. So this check number confirmation window is very critical because this is what makes the final determination if you had the printing of the checks done correctly. So if it printed and everything went great, you're going to see 10,001, 10,002. If any of these shifted, you can actually make the changes. You can say that they're damaged, not printed. If they're not printed, it will throw it back into the queue for you to do again. But if everything looks good, you're going to change the check status to confirmed. If you screw up with this and you accidentally get distracted or you leave your desk or something closes or crashes, you can go back there, modules, banking, and then check number confirmation, and it'll show you this same window. So you can always get back here, but you need to confirm these. If you don't confirm them, you're going to have them left into confirmation. They're not going to be confirmed in the system as the right numbers, and you're going to run into problems later. So I'm going to confirm and update these. So now if we go back, oops, we have nothing left in there. If we go back to banking, outgoing payments, checks for payments, we're going to now see that we have assigned numbers for those checks that we have done there. So that is about it for me. I've covered payment terms, setup for vendors, how to get into the payment wizard, a little bit more about check management and check printing. Are there any questions from the audience or any scenarios anybody would like me to discuss?
Thanks, Mike. Yeah, you can use the chat box if anybody has questions, and I'll just raise your hand and I'll unmute you.
It's a super necessary process, not the most exciting.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So
my best.
Nobody has any questions? We're all right then, I guess.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Mike. Thanks, everybody.
All right.
And this is going to be on our YouTube page, Forgestic YouTube page. We put all our recordings there. So if anybody wants to come back and view it again, you may. So have a great weekend, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you. Thanks, Tracy.
Bye.
Bye.